I used to think we were happy. Not the kind of happiness that comes from constant highs or extravagant gestures, but the steady, enduring kind that builds over time. Lisa and I had been together for 8 years, married for 5. She was the light of my life, a beautiful, intelligent woman who seemed to love me as much as I loved her. Or so I thought. The night everything changed started out so innocently. We were at a mutual friend's party, a celebration of his promotion to a senior position at some tech company. The drinks were flowing, the music was loud, and the air was thick with laughter and chatter. Lisa was in her element, mingling effortlessly with people, while I stuck to my usual role of quiet observer, drink in hand, content to watch her shine. As the night wore on, Lisa got drunker than usual. I'd seen her tipsy before, but this was different. Her speech slurred, and she started saying things that didn't make sense, or perhaps made too much sense. At first, it was little jabs, veiled in humor. Comments about my predictable routine, my lack of ambition, how I always seemed to play it safe. The words stung, but I brushed them off. She was drunk. People say things they don't mean when they're drunk, right? I was helping her into the car when it happened. She laughed, a bitter edge to her voice, and muttered, "I don't even know why I married you. I'm not attracted to you anymore." Time seemed to stop. I froze, one hand on the car door, the other gripping her arm to steady her. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You heard me," she said, her words sluggish but clear enough to cut me like a knife. "You're so boring. You don't excite me anymore. God, I've tried, but it's just not there." The drive home was silent, except for the hum of the engine and the occasional sniffle from her as the alcohol made her emotional. I felt like I was on autopilot, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly they ached. Her words replayed in my head, each repetition hitting harder than the last. When we got home, I helped her to bed. She collapsed onto the mattress, mumbling incoherently, and passed out within minutes. I stood there, staring at her sleeping form, a woman I thought I knew, someone I had built my entire life around. It wasn't just the lack of attraction that gutted me. It was the contempt in her voice, the way she dismissed everything I was, everything I had done for her. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Had I missed the signs? Were there signs? Was this something she'd been feeling for a long time, or was it just the alcohol talking? And then the final blow came. As I reached down to pull the blanket over her, she murmured, "I shouldn't have kissed him." I froze. My blood turned to ice as the realization hit me. She wasn't just not attracted to me. She had been unfaithful. That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay. The betrayal was too much, the pain too raw. My love for Lisa had been absolute, unshakable, and she had shattered it with a few drunken words. I couldn't bear to look at her, couldn't fathom waking up beside her and pretending everything was okay. While she slept, I began packing, not loudly or angrily, but quietly, methodically. I grabbed only the essentials, clothes, my laptop, some cash. I didn't want to leave a trail. By the time the sun began to peek through the blinds, my decision was final. Lisa stirred as I stood by the door, suitcase in hand. I hesitated for a moment, torn between the urge to confront her and the overwhelming need to escape. In the end, I left without a word. The sound of the door closing behind me marking the end of one life and the beginning of another. As I drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, hurt, betrayal, but also a sense of resolve. Lisa would wake up to find me gone, and she would know why. It was only the beginning of the consequences she would face for breaking my heart. Driving away from the house we had shared for years was both liberating and terrifying. The streetlights flickered overhead as I navigated the quiet suburban roads, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stop until I was far enough away that Lisa wouldn't be able to find me. She didn't deserve the closure of a conversation or the satisfaction of begging for forgiveness, not after what she had done. The first thing I did was find a cheap motel off the interstate. The room was dingy, with peeling wallpaper and a faint smell of mildew, but it was exactly what I needed, unremarkable and anonymous. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the worn carpet, my mind racing. What would I do next? How could I ensure she wouldn't trace me? I pulled out my laptop, connected to the motel's painfully slow Wi-Fi, and began dismantling the life I had built with Lisa. Our shared bank accounts were the first to go. I transferred my portion of the savings to a new account I had opened months ago, back when I was toying with the idea of starting a business. At the time, it had been a precautionary move, something Lisa had mocked me for. "Why do you always plan for disasters that'll never happen?" she'd asked. I guess I'd planned for this one without even realizing it. Next, I sent a resignation email to my boss. I kept it short and professional, citing personal reasons for my immediate departure. My job wasn't just a paycheck, it was part of my identity. But I couldn't risk Lisa using my workplace to track me down. By dawn, I had erased every trace of myself from our shared life. The house deed in both our names would remain hers to deal with. The credit cards, the utilities, the streaming subscriptions, she could keep them all. The only thing I left behind was a letter. The letter wasn't for her benefit, it was for mine. Writing it gave me a sense of finality, a chance to put my feelings into words without the risk of her interrupting or twisting my meaning. It wasn't a long letter, just a few sentences scribbled on a piece of notebook paper. "Lisa, I heard what you said. I can't unhear it. You took something from me that I can't get back. Not just my trust, but the belief that we were in this together. I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back. Don't try to find me." I folded the note neatly and left it on the kitchen counter where I knew she'd see it. Then I walked out the door, locking it behind me for the last time. The next few days were a blur of movement. I drove across state lines, stopping only for gas and cheap food. I ditched my old phone and bought a prepaid one, something basic with no bells or whistles. I found another motel, this one a little nicer, and began scouting for a new place to live. I settled in a mid-sized city a few hours away, a place big enough to get lost in, but small enough to feel manageable. I found a studio apartment that was clean and affordable, paid 3 months rent up front, and started piecing together a new life. Every now and then, I'd think about Lisa waking up to an empty house. I pictured her confusion the moment she found the letter, the daunting realization of what she had done. A part of me wanted to call her, to hear her reaction, but I resisted. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing I still cared enough to listen. Instead, I focused on building a wall between my old life and my new one. I deleted my social media accounts, changed my email, and ignored the occasional calls from unknown numbers that I assumed were Lisa or someone she had enlisted to help find me. Each unanswered ring felt like a small victory, a reminder that I was finally in control. It wasn't easy starting over. I missed my friends, my routine, even the little things, like the way the sunlight streamed through the kitchen window in the mornings. But every time I felt tempted to go back, I remembered her words, "I'm not attracted to you anymore." The bitterness in her voice, the casual cruelty of her confession. And then there was the kiss, the betrayal I couldn't ignore, even if I tried. She hadn't just hurt me. She had taken something sacred and thrown it away. By the end of the first week, I was resolved. This wasn't just about escaping her. It was about making sure she felt the weight of what she had done. She deserved to know what it felt like to lose everything, to wake up one day and realize the person you thought you'd spend your life with was gone forever. I wasn't just going to disappear. I was going to make sure she felt the consequences of her actions in ways she couldn't ignore. As I sat in my empty apartment, staring at the bare walls, a plan began to form in my mind. It wasn't enough to leave her behind. I needed to make sure she understood the gravity of her choices. I needed her to suffer the way I was suffering now. When Lisa woke up, the first thing she noticed was the pounding in her head. The second was the silence. Normally, I'd have been in the kitchen by now, brewing coffee or scrolling through my phone at the table. But the house was eerily still, the kind of quiet that feels wrong, like the absence of something important. She groaned, rolling over to glance at the clock. 10:47 a.m. late, even for a hungover Saturday. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and shuffled into the hallway, calling my name. "John? You here?" No answer. The unease began as a small seed in her chest, growing with each empty room she passed. The kitchen was spotless. No coffee brewing, no dishes in the sink. That's when she saw the letter, folded neatly on the counter. Her name was scrawled across the top in my familiar handwriting, but it looked different somehow, sharper, angrier. She unfolded it, her eyes scanning the short note. At first, it didn't register. She read it again, then a third time, her breath catching in her throat. Lisa, I heard what you said. I can't unhear it. You took something from me that I can't get back. Not just my trust, but the belief that we were in this together. I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back. Don't try to find me. Her knees buckled, and she sank into one of the kitchen chairs, the letter trembling in her hands. The events of the previous night came rushing back in fragments. The party, the drinks, the fight, her words. God, what did I say? And then she remembered. Not all of it, but enough. She remembered laughing, mocking me, saying things she didn't mean, or maybe she did, but not like that. And then the kiss. A moment of drunken stupidity with a coworker she barely knew. Her stomach churned as shame and panic washed over her. Lisa grabbed her phone, dialing my number with shaking hands. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Nothing. She switched to text, firing off messages in rapid succession. John, please call me. Where are you? I'm so sorry. Please come home. Each one went unanswered. By the time she gave up, tears were streaming down her face. The next few days were a nightmare for Lisa. At first, she convinced herself I was just cooling off, taking some time to think. But as the hours stretched into days, reality began to set in. I wasn't coming back. She called everyone she could think of. Our friends, my coworkers, even my parents. No one knew where I was, or if they did, they weren't telling her. Her calls to the police were equally fruitless. He's an adult, the officer had said, his tone detached. It doesn't sound like he's missing, just that he doesn't want to be found. Lisa threw herself into the search, combing through our shared accounts for clues. But I had been thorough. The bank accounts were drained, the credit cards canceled, even my email had been deactivated. It was like I had vanished into thin air. Her life began to unravel in ways she hadn't anticipated. Without me to help with the bills, the financial strain became immediate. She hadn't realized how much of the household stability had rested on my shoulders, the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries. I had always handled those things quietly, without complaint. Now, faced with the reality of managing it all herself, Lisa was overwhelmed. Her social life, once vibrant and full of casual brunches and late-night conversations, began to dwindle. Word of her behavior at the party had spread. Whispered accusations of infidelity, drunken confessions overheard by people she thought were friends. The same coworkers who had laughed at her jokes and admired her confidence now avoided her in the break room, their smiles brittle, their conversations brief. At work, she tried to maintain her composure, but the stress and guilt were taking their toll. She missed deadlines, snapped at colleagues, and spent more time staring blankly at her computer screen than actually working. Her boss called her in for a meeting one afternoon, his tone carefully neutral. Is everything okay, Lisa? You haven't been yourself lately. I'm fine, she lied, forcing a smile. Just going through some personal stuff. Well, if you need time off, let us know, he said, but the subtext was clear. She was skating on thin ice. At night, the house felt impossibly large and empty. She wandered from room to room, searching for some trace of me. An old shirt, a forgotten notebook, anything that might make her feel closer to the man she had so carelessly pushed away. But I had taken everything that mattered. All that remained were memories, each one more painful than the last. Lisa started drinking more, trying to drown out the guilt and loneliness. But the alcohol only made it worse, magnifying her mistakes and filling her mind with relentless questions. Why hadn't she stopped herself? Why had she thrown away a man who had loved her so completely? The weight of her regret was suffocating. She wanted to fix things, to make it right, but she didn't even know where to begin. I had left her with nothing, not just physically, but emotionally. She had always thought of me as steady, dependable, unshakable. She had never considered what might happen if she pushed too far. Now she knew. As the days turned into weeks, one thought consumed her. She had lost me, and she had no one to blame but herself. Starting over wasn't easy, but it gave me purpose. My days were simple at first. Wake up, go for a run, explore my new city. I found a part-time job at a local hardware store, something low-stress that kept me busy and paid the bills. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for anyone but myself. But no matter how far I tried to run, the memory of Lisa's betrayal clung to me like a shadow. I couldn't forget her words, the disdain in her voice, or the way she so carelessly discarded everything we had built together. Every time I thought about her, anger bubbled beneath the surface, threatening to consume me. I didn't just want to disappear from her life. I wanted her to feel what I had felt, broken, humiliated, and alone. The first step in my plan was to gather information. I knew Lisa well enough to predict her moves. She wasn't the type to let go easily, and I figured she would try to track me down. I created a new social media account under a fake name, blending into the background of her online world. She hadn't made her profiles private, so it was easy to see her posts and piece together the state of her life. It didn't take long to confirm my suspicions. Her posts had grown sparse and erratic, each one more desperate than the last. A picture of an empty coffee mug captioned, "Mornings aren't the same without you." A late-night selfie with puffy eyes and a drink in hand accompanied by a vague, sorrowful message. She was unraveling, and it was only the beginning. From a distance, I began to strike. Small, calculated moves that would make her life more difficult. I knew where she worked, so I created an anonymous email account and sent a carefully worded message to her boss, hinting at her affair and drunken behavior at the party. I wasn't explicit. I didn't want to come across as a bitter ex, but I planted enough seeds to make them question her professionalism. It worked. A few weeks later, I saw a post from her. "Work stress is at an all-time high. Feeling like I can't catch a break." I smiled grimly, imagining the whispers in the office, the subtle shift in how her colleagues treated her. Next, I turned my attention to her social circle. I remembered the coworker she had kissed, the one who had been a little too friendly at the party. It didn't take much to find him online. A quick message to his wife, yes, he was married, was all it took to ignite chaos in his personal life. Lisa wasn't mentioned by name, but I knew the fallout would reach her. Sure enough, her posts became more frantic, her smiles more forced. A group photo with her coworkers at happy hour was captioned, trying to stay positive, but I could see the tension in her face, the cracks forming in the persona she tried so hard to maintain. Despite the satisfaction I felt watching her suffer, there were moments when doubt crept in. Was I going too far? Was this really justice, or just pettiness disguised as revenge? But then I'd remember the pain of that night, the humiliation, the betrayal, and my resolve would harden. Lisa had taken everything from me. She deserved to feel the same emptiness I had felt. One evening, I received an email from a mutual friend. I hadn't spoken to anyone from my old life since I'd left, so seeing his name in my inbox was a shock. The message was brief. "John, Lisa's been asking around about you. She's not doing well. I don't know what happened between you two, but I thought you should know. Mark." I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond, to tell him everything, but I knew it wouldn't help. Explaining my side of the story wouldn't erase what she had done or make the pain go away. Instead, I doubled down. I created fake accounts to send her anonymous messages, reminding her of her mistakes. "Do you regret it?" One message read. Another simply said, "You don't deserve forgiveness." She began posting less frequently, her once curated online presence crumbling into silence. When she did post, the sadness in her eyes was unmistakable. She was struggling, and I knew I was the cause. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Watching Lisa's life fall apart from a distance wasn't enough. I wanted her to know it was me behind the unraveling, to face the consequences of her actions head-on. But that would mean breaking my silence, confronting her in a way I wasn't sure I was ready for. I was ready. As I sat in my small apartment, surrounded by the fragments of my new life, I realized there was only one way to truly close this chapter. Lisa had to know what she had done to me, and I had to see her reaction with my own eyes. The time for hiding was over. It was time for confrontation. Weeks turned into months, and despite my calculated actions to dismantle Lisa's life, I felt no sense of closure. The revenge that had seemed so sweet in theory now felt hollow. I wanted her to understand the depth of the pain she had caused me, not just through the fallout of her actions, but by facing it directly. It was time for her to hear my voice again, not for reconciliation, but for the reckoning she deserved. One evening, I wrote her an email, not a long one, just enough to tell her I wasn't lost, wasn't forgotten, and was watching her unravel. Lisa, I see you've been trying to find me. Stop. I'm not coming back. I've moved on, and I don't owe you anything. But I want you to know this. Every tear you've cried, every piece of your life that's fallen apart, that's just a fraction of what you deserve. You betrayed me, and now you're paying the price. You don't get to ask for forgiveness. You made your choice, and I made mine. Goodbye forever. I hesitated before hitting send. Part of me wondered if this would only reignite the pain for both of us, but my anger pushed aside the doubt. I clicked the button and let the words fly into her inbox. The response came quicker than I expected. Less than an hour later, my phone buzzed. A notification from the burner email account I had used for anonymity. John, please, just talk to me. I'll do anything. I don't know what's worse, what I did to you, or what I've done to myself because of it. I've lost everything, and I know I deserve it, but I need to say I'm sorry. Please let me say it. Her words had the effect of a small earthquake, subtle but destabilizing. I could sense her desperation, her regret, but it didn't soften me. If anything, it reignited the flame of my anger. Instead of responding, I decided to push her further. I sent another anonymous message, pretending to be someone who had overheard the whispers at her office. Lisa, word gets around. Did you really think no one would find out? People know what you did. You can't hide from it forever. The message was vague enough to keep her guessing, but specific enough to plant seeds of paranoia. I imagined her reading it, heart pounding, wondering how much the sender knew. Did they know about the affair? About her drunken confession? Would they tell others? The thought brought a grim smile to my face. Days later, another email came through. This one was longer, almost frantic. John, if you're reading this, I need you to know how sorry I am. I don't expect you to forgive me, and I wouldn't blame you if you hate me forever. I hate myself for what I did. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it all away. I don't know if you'll ever see this or if it even matters, but I loved you. I still love you. Losing you has been the hardest thing I've ever gone through, and I don't know how to fix the damage I've caused. Please, if there's any part of you that still cares, just let me say this to your face. I need to see you, to know if there's even a shred of hope left for us. Her words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. The anger I had clung to for months suddenly felt heavier, harder to carry. Was this what I had wanted all along? For her to feel broken, desperate, and alone? Or had I wanted her to understand the depth of the love she had betrayed? I decided it was time to confront her directly, not to forgive, but to make her understand what she had lost. Using the same burner email, I sent her a location and a time. A quiet coffee shop in the middle of the city, far from where we used to live. If you want to say something, come here tomorrow at 3 p.m. I'll give you 5 minutes. The next day, I arrived early. The coffee shop was half empty, its patrons quietly sipping their drinks or typing on laptops. I chose a corner table with a clear view of the entrance and waited. Lisa arrived on the dot, her face pale and drawn, her eyes scanning the room nervously. When she spotted me, her expression crumbled into something between relief and heartbreak. John, she breathed, crossing the room and sitting down across from me. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us. She fidgeted with her hands, her lips trembling as she searched for the right words. I don't even know where to start, she stammered. I'm so sorry for everything, for the things I said, for what I did. You didn't deserve any of it. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. You're right. I didn't. She flinched, tears welling in her eyes. I was stupid, selfish. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought I wanted more, something different. But I was wrong. I lost the best thing I ever had, and I can't fix it. Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret. For a moment, I felt the tiniest flicker of pity, but it wasn't enough to erase the damage she had done. Lisa, I said finally, my voice steady but cold, Do you know what it feels like to hear the person you love say they don't want you anymore? To find out they betrayed you in the worst way possible? Because that's what you did to me. I know, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I know, and I'll regret it every day for the rest of my life. Good, I said, standing up. You should. Without another word, I walked out, leaving her sitting there, broken and alone, just like she had left me. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt an overwhelming sense of finality. The confrontation I had dreaded and, in some twisted way, craved was over. Lisa's tears, her broken voice, and her desperate apologies had all been laid bare, but they hadn't given me the satisfaction I thought they would. Instead, I felt a hollow ache where my anger had once been. For months, I had lived for this moment, believing it would be the ultimate revenge. But as I turned the corner and left Lisa behind for good, I realized something profound. I wasn't free, not yet. Over the next few days, I tried to make sense of my emotions. My anger had fueled me for so long that letting it go felt almost impossible. I had built my new life on a foundation of resentment, and now that foundation was crumbling. I threw myself into work, took longer runs, and spent hours in the quiet solitude of my apartment. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the echoes of Lisa's words at the coffee shop. I'll regret it every day for the rest of my life. Regret? It was a heavy word, one that carried its own kind of suffering. Lisa wasn't the only one carrying it. I was too. One night, unable to sleep, I sat down and wrote in a journal I had picked up at a thrift store. I poured out everything I had been feeling, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the rage, and the emptiness that followed. Writing it down felt like lifting a weight off my chest, a slow release of the poison I had been carrying. When I finished, I stared at the pages for a long time. I didn't know if it was forgiveness I was seeking or just a way to move on, but I knew I couldn't live like this anymore. My life couldn't revolve around Lisa or what she had done to me. It had to be about me, my healing, my future, my happiness. Lisa, meanwhile, was facing her own reckoning. I didn't need to be in her life to know she was struggling. Word had trickled back to me through mutual acquaintances. She had taken a leave of absence from work and was rarely seen outside her home. Whatever image of perfection she had tried to maintain was now a distant memory. A part of me wanted to reach out, to tell her that I understood her pain and wished her well, but I knew better. That chapter of my life was closed, and reopening it would only bring more complications. As the weeks turned into months, I began to rebuild my life with a new sense of purpose. I enrolled in evening classes to learn woodworking, something I had always wanted to do but never had time for. I joined a local hiking group, making new friends who knew nothing of my past. Slowly, the pieces of my life began to fall into place. One day, while hiking through a trail in the nearby mountains, I paused to take in the view. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow over the landscape. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt at peace. Lisa's betrayal was still a scar, but it no longer defined me. I had survived, and I was stronger for it. As for Lisa, I could only guess at what her life had become. I imagined she was still picking up the pieces, trying to make sense of the wreckage she had created. Whether she found redemption or remained trapped in regret, I would never know. And that was okay. Life doesn't always tie itself up neatly. People hurt each other, make mistakes, and carry their scars in different ways. But what I had learned was that healing doesn't come from revenge or even from closure. It comes from letting go. On a quiet spring morning, I burned the journal I had filled with my pain. I watched the flames consume the pages, the smoke rising into the sky like a final goodbye. When the last ember died out, I felt lighter than I had in years. I wasn't the same man I had been when I left Lisa, and I was grateful for that. I had found a new version of myself, stronger, wiser, and unshackled from the past. As I walked away from the ashes, I thought of the words I would carry with me for the rest of my life. You can't control what others do to you, but you can control how you respond. And with that, I moved forward, leaving both the pain and the revenge behind.